Psalm chapter 10. Why, O Lord, do you stand far off? Why do you hide yourself in times of trouble? In his arrogance, the wicked man hunts down the weak, who are caught in the schemes he devises. He boasts of the cravings of his heart. He blesses the greedy and reviles the Lord. In his pride, the wicked does not seek him. In all his thoughts, there is no room for God. His ways are always prosperous. He is haughty, and your laws are far from him. He sneers at all his enemies. He says to himself, "Nothing will shake me. I'll always be happy and never have trouble." His mouth is full of curses and lies and threats. Trouble and evil are under his tongue. He lies in wait near the villages. From ambush he murders the innocent, watching in secret for his victims. He lies in wait like a lion in cover. He lies in wait to catch the helpless. He catches the helpless and drags them off in his net. His victims are crushed. They collapse. They fall under his strength. He says to himself, "God has forgotten." He covers his face and never sees. Arise, Lord. Lift up your hand, O God. Do not forget the helpless. Why does the wicked man revile God? Why does he say to himself, "He won't call me to account"? But you, O God, do see trouble and grief. You consider it to take it in hand. The victim commits himself to you. You are the helper of the fatherless. Break the arm of the wicked and evil man. Call him to account for his wickedness that would not be found out. The Lord is king forever and ever. The nations will perish from his land. You hear, O Lord, the desire of the afflicted. You encourage them, and you listen to their cry, defending the fatherless and the oppressed, in order that man who is of the earth may terrify no more. Psalm chapter 10. Today is February the 1st, 2023. Thanks for joining me. So there are two main things that leapt out at me from reading this psalm today. The first of the two is sort of intellectual and philosophical in its nature, and took me down such a track as I began to consider it. The second one hit me like a slap. It wrung my ears and brought me back down to earth, out of the realm of the intellect, and caused me to dwell on that which is human and the flesh. Here's the first thing. In Psalm 10, someone is right and someone is wrong. Either the perpetrator is right and, quote, God covers his face and never sees, or the victims are right and God does see, quote, trouble and grief and considers it to take it in hand. One of the two has to be wrong and the other right. There are other possibilities on the spectrum of belief, though, that some would have us consider. One is that there is no God and no purpose in our lives. In this view, we, living humans, are simply links in a chain of cause and effect. We cause things and we effect things. And the ultimate cause, if there was one, is murky, remote, and utterly outside of the ken of direct human experience or knowledge. And that's if we go backward in time. If we go forward, we find ourselves at the same place of knowledge, which is to say, completely at a loss to see the last effect, or whether there even is such a thing. Some might at this point refer to the Big Bang or the heat death of the universe, but let us follow that line of thinking at a later point of the discussion. Another view, and perhaps a subset of the previous view that there is no God and there is no purpose, is the possibility of a purpose in the original cause, but that purpose has not been provided to us in a way that is clear, or maybe the original purpose has died. In this view, we are left to sniff about like blind rats trying to ascertain meaning in the unknowable maze in which we find ourselves. This is a subset of there being no purpose, because if it is unknowable whether there even is a purpose, we find ourselves at the same de facto conclusion. No person can declaim a purpose, and therefore there is no basis for the superiority of one view over any other. The perpetrator can go on perpetrating. The victims can go on being victimized, and it does not really matter. Their views on God will not keep their bread from baking, nor keep their bread from someone breaking in to steal it. One might say that whether they bake bread or break bread, or break in to steal it, they do so with the same purposeless locutions. So one might say that, regardless of whether there is an original purpose or not, and regardless of whether we are able to ascertain it or not, we humans can assign purpose to whatever we like. We can, in effect, create purpose for ourselves and instill meaning by mandate or fiat, as it were, in the events and objects around us. Some people believe we do this as a matter of course, that we do it spontaneously, involuntarily, and constantly. They would say that in perceiving an object, we create it. Somewhere in such discussions, we usually find a wrestling with the concept of consciousness and the mystery of the conscious mind. And make no mistake, most who are intellectually honest stand back in great respect and awe of this mystery, namely that we appear to ourselves to be conscious creatures, and we struggle to define what that even means. Going with the common supposition, though, that we are actually conscious, we find ourselves back at this discussion's first multi-pronged fork in the road, the possibilities that exist outside of the proposed shared view of those in the psalm, both the evil and the innocent, that God exists, and, central to the whole point of the psalm, whether justice will prevail. At this point, I return to the psalmist's point of view, that there is a God, and it appears to be understood that there is a purpose, or at least a set of divine rules, upon which we are able to form a concept of justice. Ultimately, at least for the psalmist, it appears that purpose loses its essence if there is no such thing as justice. For if there is no justice, the evil can destroy the good and the innocent, and in so doing destroy any good purpose. Which leads to a second assumption that appears to be here in the psalm, that God is good, that he is on the side of good, and therefore is good himself, and that he will prevail in the affairs of ultimate and perfect justice. This brings me to the second main thing I noticed. And I noticed it, I think, and it left marks, because it is the second time that it makes its appearance in a second consecutive psalm, which is to say we saw it in Psalm 9, and we see it in Psalm 10, and the second citing drives it home. In Psalm 9, it takes the form of an appeal or a prayer. Quote, "Arise, O Lord, let not man triumph. Let the nations be judged in your presence. Strike them with terror, O Lord. Let the nations know they are but men." End quote. That's Psalm chapter 9, verses 19 to 20. In Psalm 10, it takes the form of a declaration. Quote, "The Lord is king forever and ever." End quote. He hears, encourages, listens to, and defends the afflicted, and he causes the wicked to perish, quote, "in order that man who is of the earth may terrify no more." End quote. Psalm 10 tells us flatly, humans terrorize. We terrify each other. We terrify the creatures of the earth. Let that sink in. Accept the truth of it. But take this dose of reality with it. These same scriptures that serve as confessions of our terribleness, confessions of our ability to wickedly, forcibly hold down, torture, steal from, and kill that which is lesser than us, or merely that which is different than us, are the same scriptures that tell us that God loves us anyway. More on this below, but for now let us turn to a terror that transcends the terror that can be brought by men. The terror of the living God. Proverbs chapter 9, verse 10 begins, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom." Many interpret this kind of fear to mean, quote, "reverent awe," end quote. I agree with them, yet I think it also means the terror of the ultimate, righteous, all-powerful judge who will mete out justice for the wrong you have done, the kind of justice you deserve, and the kind you cannot avoid, ignore, or be numb to, the kind you will feel and experience, the kind that has no appeal, no escape, and which will bring at the end of your great dread, whether you seek to deny or escape it or not, a type of searing pain and agony that you had hoped did not exist anywhere in the vast reckonings of the universe. This also would be applicable to me. For me, at least, I must use every element of my being, perhaps especially my intellect, to ensure my fear of God is palpable and present, and for me, ever held in abeyance, in my awareness and in my heart. I say held in abeyance, for I am a follower of Jesus Christ, and in him I find hope of forgiveness, in him the hope of standing righteous before God in judgment. Returning to that which I said left marks, we men are wicked and capable of terrorizing the innocent and the good. We do well to pray to God to deliver us from ourselves, from the nations we make of ourselves, from the flesh that we give into, in order that we may be seen by him as righteous, covered over by the sacrifice he himself made for us in the sending of his Son, and avoiding that judgment and damnation that we otherwise face. We do well, too, beyond that, to ask for the peace that comes when justice is administered, that we be proper agents for peacemaking and for justice. Ultimately, that our walk might be more as he walked, righteous and good, full of purpose in this day, dwelling in the present time of our own calling. Selah. Before I close, I mentioned earlier a couple of things that I said I would return to: the Big Bang and the heat death of the universe, the beginning and the end, according to the theories that we have developed, and theories, after all, to which many subscribe. I spoke of these things being remote and unknowable, beyond our ken. Yet many have adopted them because we are able to project, based on physics and mathematics, both backward and forward in time. We are able to measure things, or so it certainly appears to us. I can, for instance, measure the length of a pencil with a wooden ruler. And when I do so, I will be able to provide a number and an answer to you, which you will be able to find yourself by replicating my measurement for yourself. We can then be in agreement about the length of the pencil based on the wooden ruler and our adopted, shared, and mutually agreed upon units of the measurement of distance. Yet a theory is, by its nature, an abstraction. This is why we refer to Pythagorean's theorem. It is, like perhaps everything in mathematics, true in a sense, but true only in concept. It is not a thing that can be seen or weighed. You cannot smell a right angle with your nose, or even measure one out to perfection. You can go to whatever extreme you desire in trying to craft a perfect right angle, but you will always be a gluon or two off if you try to reduce the thing to 3 dimensions. Let's look at another brief example. I cannot in fact hand you 7 tennis balls. I can hand you 7 conglomerations of matter that we can define as tennis balls, but I can also tell you that there is only 1 tennis ball and that the rest are simply close approximations, i.e., I cannot hand you exactly 7 tennis balls. I can hand you 1 and then 6 additional approximations that we can round up or down in order to make them into 6 conceptual replications of the first one. Expressed mathematically, the first tennis ball could be seen as 1.00000 over 1. The second might be 0.9999998 over 1 of the first, and therefore not quite a tennis ball, given that the first tennis ball is the perfect example and definition of a tennis ball. The third ball might be 1.0000002 over 1 of the first ball, and so on for the remaining balls. So I can never actually hand you 7 tennis balls, though we can agree in principle or conceptually that that is what I am doing, in much the same way that we can agree that the corners of my business card form right angles, even though in exact reality they do not. To complicate things even further, we might express the tennis balls by color, introducing additional inexactitudes. Or we might think of the tennis balls over time, in which case tennis ball 1 is not exactly tennis ball 1 60 seconds later, having been broken down ever so slightly by electromagnetic energy, among other things, of one kind or another. So what does all this mean exactly? Well, conceptually it means everything, whereas factually it perhaps means nothing. The point is this: We can try to sew up everything between the Big Bang and the heat death of the universe, much as we can try to sew up that 2 + 2 = 4. We can stipulate that the Big Bang was the first cause, and the last bit of energy dissipation as the final effect, the effect after which there will not be enough energy for any additional causes. Yep, nice and neat, all sewn up and put in a coin purse, with your love of chocolate and the memory of your grandmother accounted for in some mysterious way, right there inside the purse. That, by the way, is what I do, except I allow myself to conceive an additional abstraction, one more powerful, more fundamental, more encompassing than the universe itself, the author and designer of right angles and conceptual numbers like 7, one who reveals himself through his design, even his design of me, the body I dwell in, the mind I think with, the conscious being that I am. He is the ultimate denominator that defines and gives meaning to everything, the infinite base, the one to whom our entire universe fits between parentheses. He gives us purpose, and none can take it away. He counts the coins in the purse. And since I began with Psalm 10 and this discussion around the topic of justice, let me just ask, can you conceive of a universe in which justice is indefinable, unattainable, where your good work is meaningless, lacking as it does a definition of the word good, where the evildoer bears no consequence, neither in the world of men, nor in the conscience of his own being, nor in the afterlife, where you have no loved ones because there is no such thing as love? God forbid. These are my thoughts on Psalm chapter 10. Thanks for joining me.